Rishi Sunak last night, suffering a blow in the House of Lords when peers, that's a surprise, voted against the ratification of the UK's treaty with Rwanda, something that possibly can't work. Joining us now from her, well, I would say mansion in the Cotswolds, former Culture Secretary, the legend that is Nadine Dorries. Morning, Nads, how are you?
Good morning. I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm all right. I actually don't want to start with Rwanda, which is why I want to start with the conversation we just had with Hamish Breton-Gordon there. Houthi strikes overnight. Cameron saying a proportionate display. You know, we have to make the point for the people who say, oh, it's warmongering. These ships bring everything to this country, food, grain, fuel, everything. And if they are not able to get through, all the people in Britain who are doubting the importance of these strikes, it will cost you more in your pocket, won't it, Nadine?
Well, that's exactly the point. It'll cost you more on your mortgage, more on your food bill, more on your petrol at the pumps. It will cost you, you will be directly bearing the brunt if we don't stop the Houthis. And, you know, this isn't something which has happened overnight. The Houthis have been waging this war of attrition for quite a long time now, years. And it's come to the point where they've become so confident that they've been launching ever more audacious attacks. And the other response from both the UK and the US, and as we've seen this morning, other members of the global community are absolutely proportionate and absolutely right. We have to act in self-defense when they attack our ships. And we also have to put a stop to what they are trying to do, which is to cause irreparable damage to our economy, to the Western economies. And so it has to be done. So any bleating hearts out there are people who go, oh, you can't do this. Well, that's, you know, you say that, but you won't be saying that when your mortgage payments go up and inflation rockets and the cost of living is more expensive. You need to man and woman up and realise that this is action which has to be taken.
Completely agree.
The other big story that's dominating the agenda today, Nadine, is the Labour Party's new strategy for the NHS. Murmurings of this to come and then real clarification today. Wes Streeting says, look, I have found and identified about £10 billion worth of saving in the NHS. I'm going to cut out some of that kind of complicated middle management. I'm going to implement better tech systems so people don't miss their appointments. And the pitch they're trying to make to the public is we're going to save the NHS money and make it more efficient. Of course, that has raised quite a lot of eyebrows to say that almost sounds a bit too good to be true.
Yeah, well, good luck with that, Wes. So, first of all, he doesn't have the levers of power to be able to do that. No Secretary of State has. And that's been, and since the Lansley reviews of the Lansley reforms of 2012, that has been the problem for every Secretary of State and every health minister since. What Wes, I'm sure, knows and is deliberately ignoring is the fact that as a Secretary of State, you have very little control over the NHS. You have responsibility for giving the NHS its money and setting budgets, but you don't have any operational controls in terms of how it spends it and what it does. Very little.
But Nadine, I guess the point is,
they have very little.
This is what I wanted from you, though, because my point is whether it's workable or not. You talk about putting your tanks on the Tory party's lawn for a Labour shadow health minister to say, Nadine Dorries, actually, you know what? I'm going to take on the unions. I'm going to take on all the virtue signalers and all the bureaucrats and all the people that, you know, get paid ridiculous sums to go into brainstorming sessions about how many toilets of same sex or whatever there should be. This is a Labour politician saying, by the way, I can save money. It's a leaky bucket. It's not perfect. It's not this amazing thing that we've always thought. To me, that rhetoric is exactly what the Tory party have spent years saying, which is why the Tory party under Sunak is on its backside, because this is their language. It's a very smart. It looks great for the Labour Party. You've got to admit that. This is Tory language.
It's pre-election rhetoric.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that's all it is, because Wes Streeting knows as well as anybody else that when he gets into that seat behind that desk, which I've been sat around many times, he will suddenly be told, well, you can't actually do that, Secretary of State, because you don't have the powers to do that. And that is the problem. You know, the head used to be Simon Stevens. It's Mandela, who's I can't remember, of the NHS, and the Secretary of State meet every Monday morning. And they have something called a quad where they sit around and they talk about the interaction between the government and the NHS. And I can tell you that every single Secretary of State, since there has been a Conservative government in 2010, has pleaded with the head of the NHS, as it was Sir Simon Stevens, to implement those changes which will cut out that bureaucracy and that waste. It never happens. And it won't happen under Labour either. And I hope the British public can actually see through what is rhetoric. And just to add to that, you won't remember this because it was like a storm in a couple of weeks' teacup, and it happened around the time of COVID, so it didn't really get a lot of airtime. But this was something that Matt Hancock talked about doing. He talked about bringing in legislation to wrestle some of the levers of power back into the Secretary of State's hands, away from the NHS. Labour went nuts. They went nuts. They were all over every newspaper and every television programme saying that the Conservative Party was trying to interfere with the operational running of the NHS. They absolutely chastised us for it. And guess what? The furore was so great that we dropped it, that Matt didn't pursue it, because it just became incredibly difficult. And the rhetoric was the Conservative Party want politicians to run the NHS. And who wants that? Who's safe in a politician's hands? And so I'm afraid it got dropped. And it was Labour that stopped the powers that Wes Streeting is saying he needs in order to be able to implement the changes that he wants to implement.
That is fascinating. Quickly, Rwanda from Rosie Wright.
Well, just tell us your perspective of what happened yesterday. The Lords are going to prove, it seems, a tricky sort of beast for the Prime Minister to persuade to get alongside to get this bill through.
Well, you know, there is the Parliament Act, which can be a vote. Is it the Parliament Act? There is an act which can be a vote. I think it has been a vote for many, many years, maybe even centuries, which means Parliament can overrule the Lords if it actually wanted to. But I don't believe that will happen. Call me a cynic. I'm not even actually sure whether this is a convenient situation for Rishi Sunak. Because, I've said it over and over again. For the 3 years of this Parliament, this 5-year Parliament, that Rishi Sunak was Prime Minister, he was completely opposed to Rwanda. He blocked it happening for the 3 years he was Chancellor. But Boris Johnson absolutely wanted this driven through. But as your listeners will know, you need something called collective responsibility. It's called right round. Everybody in the cabinet has to agree, particularly the Chancellor, when a major policy such as this is about to be announced. Rishi Sunak blocked it every step of the way.
Nads, I have to jump in. I don't want to, but I want to say this, and I've been saying it for a long time. Sunak made a deal with Suella Braverman to get the job. The deal on the table was you do Rwanda. It's come back to bite him on the backside. What I will agree with you is it's very easy for him now to say, if the Lords block it, I tried for you people, and the unelected second chamber did that. I could talk to you all day. I'm sorry we're rushing, but I really appreciate the time. We miss you. We'll see you very soon. Thanks a lot, Nadine. Thank you.